The first point I want to make is that everyone here, including the city, is on the same side and wants to see the boulevard and the businesses succeed and flourish. So if anyone thinks there's ulterior motives or we're trying to do something different, we're not. We all have the same thing. So that would be the first point that I would like to make, and I hope we can go forward in that vein. Point number two is the roundabout and parking structures and parking management are a critical issue, but we're not the first city ever to face this. It's a sign of success. When you have to deal with more people than you've had to deal with in the past, that's success, not failure. How you deal with it is in your control, being all of us. So what we've done is put a presentation together, and I think staff did a great job, that really looks at facts. So I'd ask you to keep an open mind. It looks at the facts of Roundabout, and it looks at the facts of other cities and what they've experienced, and it also tries to give very specific information on the situation in Lancaster, specific costs of parking structures, specific cost of roundabouts, specific number of parking spaces, utilization based on information and codes and such. So I'd ask you to look at the information, and you can either refute the information or not, but base your comments on that. And the third thing I'd ask is that at the end, let's figure this out. This is a legitimate discussion. There's legitimate points on both sides of, do you think we need something? Do we not need something? But what I'd ask is, if you don't like something, see if you have a different idea. Okay, we've had, and the key is had, some employees at the city who are really great at saying that's bad, that's bad, that's bad. That doesn't help anyone. Let's say that's bad and have this alternative idea. You may disagree with something because it's too costly or it won't work, and that's a legitimate point of view. If you also have an idea of what will work to solve the problem, we'd like to hear that too. We will be giving the same presentation to Council on Tuesday. We really welcome your input because we want to report back to Council what the input of the Boulevard Association is. You guys are the biggest stakeholders in the Boulevard, and we want to hear from you.
As Mark said, I'm Robert Neal. I'm the Public Works Director. I have worked for right here in City Hall for over 20 years, and quite honestly, I've never seen the Boulevard more vibrant. I congratulate you for the work that you guys are doing. Brian and I will rotate topics here on the Boulevard, the downtown parking, and parking structures. We have lots of information to give you. It should answer many questions that people have. We ask that you hold your questions to the end, because we're hoping that a lot of questions will be answered along the way, but we are very happy to answer questions as we can. I'm going to start by talking about the proposed Boulevard Roundabout and roundabouts in general. Here is a photograph showing 10th Street West and the Boulevard looking to the northeast. It's a recent photograph. You can see the rhombus in the photograph, and the city owns the triangular piece in the forefront of the photograph. Let me give you a little information about the intersection. Currently, we're operating at a level of service B, which means that traffic flows freely, but there are some delays. We went back and looked at the collision history for this intersection, and accidents, vary from year to year. For instance, in 2007, we had 20 collisions at this intersection and 9 related injuries. Last year, we had 13 collisions and 10 related injuries. On average, we average about 15 collisions. It's not our worst intersection, but it definitely needs improvement. This slide here shows how we propose to lay out the roundabout on the intersection. The roundabout was part of the downtown specific plan, which was finalized in 2008. It was shown as a feature for the purposes of being a gateway and also to help traffic make transitions. In 2009, we applied for a Metro grant, which we've got for about $900,000, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. In fiscal year 10-11, we put into our budget monies for studies, and we've done some studies this year. And what we're looking at is for fiscal year 11 and 12, moving forward with a capital project to potentially construct the roundabout if that's the direction we choose to go. We did the study here to really look at the impact to the properties and how effectively we could do the layout of the roundabout. What you see is that really no buildings are impacted on the intersection. There would be an exchange of property with the ARCO station in the southeast corner. We would take some property right on the corner, but actually return more property alongside the island. Our taking would be 1,300 square feet, and we would return 1,600 square feet in this layout. Also, we've been in discussions with the bookkeeping firm on the northeast corner in order to provide a little more access for pedestrians. We've been talking to them about taking about 750 square feet. If you look at the center of the traffic circle, you'll see landscaping, but the concept there is it could be any monument or any kind of feature that we want. This is just a conceptual drawing. Has laid out, we're looking at continuing to operate at a level service B. The roundabout is 2 lanes in the north-south direction and a single lane in the east-west direction. Our consultant, Scott Ritchie, is an expert in the design of roundabouts. He's designed over 100 roundabouts. He works as a consultant to the Federal Highway Administration. I want to tell you a little bit about roundabouts and what they are. A modern roundabout basically functions around the principle of yield control. Vehicles that are in the roundabout, all vehicles must yield to vehicles in the roundabout. Second part about modern day roundabouts is they're designed for slower speeds. They're typically designed for 20 miles an hour, and that's what our speed limit is designed for. This is really important when it comes to safety, and I'm going to talk about that more. In typical roundabouts, landscaping is a key feature, and it will be in ours if we move forward with it. Pedestrian access is provided for and is an important feature, and it's through breaks on these splitter islands. And lastly, all roundabouts move in a counterclockwise fashion, with the splitter islands used to align traffic to avoid confusion. I want to show you a video that the Federal Highway Administration puts out regarding roundabouts. I think it'll answer lots of questions.
Did you know that more than 20 people are killed and many more are seriously injured in crashes at intersections every day in the United States? Did you know that most of these deaths and injuries are due to right-angle crashes that occur at signalized and stop-controlled intersections? How much time do you spend stopped at a red light waiting for the light to change when there was no traffic on the cross street? Did you know there is an intersection alternative that is substantially safer than signalized and stop-controlled intersections and much more efficient? The U.S. DOT's Federal Highway Administration, FHWA, has identified modern roundabout intersections as one of 9 proven life-saving roadway safety strategies. Modern roundabouts are not only safer than traditional signalized and stop-controlled intersections. Where appropriate and properly designed, roundabouts operate more efficiently, often have lower life cycle costs, and result in increased fuel efficiency. So, what is a roundabout? A roundabout is a circular intersection. Traffic flows counterclockwise around a center island. Entering traffic yields to circulating traffic in the roundabout. Channelized approaches using splitter islands deflect traffic as it enters the intersection, slowing speeds. While the vast majority of roundabouts are single lane, 1/4 of the roundabouts in the U.S. have 2 lanes, which also provides safety benefits. Roundabouts with up to 3 lanes have been successfully built. Mini roundabouts can be used in low-speed urban environments in lieu of a stop sign or traffic signal. Roundabouts are different from other types of circular intersections that you might have seen. They are not rotaries or the older traffic circles, which are still common in the northeastern United States, which typically have higher speeds and approaches and usually higher speeds within the circle. They may use stop or signal control, or they may require circulating traffic to yield to entering traffic. A roundabout is also not the same thing as a neighborhood traffic circle, typically used on local streets for speed control. Roundabouts have several distinguishing characteristics and benefits, setting them apart from other intersection types. Traffic can move freely through roundabouts. This makes them more efficient than signalized or stop-controlled intersections. Unlike other types of intersections, roundabouts are designed to slow the speed of vehicles entering by deflecting them from a straight-line path into the roundabout. Drivers approaching the roundabout have time to judge for gaps in the circulating traffic and either yield or adjust their speed before entering the intersection. This allows for safer entries into circulating traffic. In addition to channelized approaches, signs and pavement markings on the roadway guide drivers to make sure they take the proper entry path. Roundabout intersections can require additional space compared to a traditional intersection, but they may be constructed within the existing right-of-way. Roundabouts eliminate dangerous left turns across opposing traffic lanes and virtually eliminate high-speed right-angle and head-on crashes. While initial construction costs can be higher with roundabouts, they often have a lower operating and maintenance cost than signalized intersections. They can have ongoing costs for lighting and maintaining the landscaping, but unlike a signalized intersection, there is no signal equipment to install, power, and maintain. Roundabouts have longer service lives than traditional intersections, resulting in better economic value over the long term, especially when you factor in the reduction of fatal and injury crashes. Roundabouts are also the greenest intersection alternative, and not only because of their aesthetic appeal. Reduced vehicle idling means fewer emissions and less wasted fuel. Less acceleration and fewer sudden hard stops means quieter, more peaceful transportation through communities. Landscaping in the Central Island, splitter islands, and along the approaches can further benefit and enhance community livability. With all of these benefits, why aren't all transportation agencies building modern roundabout intersections? One of the biggest reasons transportation agencies overlook this proven intersection safety solution is out of concern that the public just won't accept them. Trying one roundabout is usually all it takes to convince even the biggest skeptic of their benefits.
In the 12 years the department has been building roundabouts, we've had our share of skeptics. But what we found is after the roundabout is built, the skeptics become supportive of the idea, which is a tribute to the time savings and the safety benefits that a roundabout offers.
Some states now have roundabout policies that state that roundabouts should be considered as an intersection alternative. Numerous states like Washington and cities across the country like Carmel, Indiana, have embraced roundabouts and support their development. Washington State now has more than 150 roundabouts, and the city of Carmel, Indiana alone has more than 50 roundabouts, with many more planned.
We were one of the first communities in the Midwest to build roundabouts and make the determination that they work better than stoplights in many, many cases.
A common concern for people that have not experienced driving through a properly designed roundabout is that they won't be able to get used to the new traffic pattern. But studies consistently show just the opposite. The public overwhelmingly supports roundabouts after they are constructed. older Americans in particular are supportive of roundabouts.
By 2025, a quarter of all drivers in the United States will be over the age of 65. Intersections are the single most dangerous traffic environment for drivers of any age, with left-hand turns being the single most dangerous traffic maneuver that any of us can make. 40% of all crashes that involve drivers over the age of 65 occur at intersections. This is nearly twice the rate of experienced younger drivers. AARP would like to see more roundabouts constructed because of the many safety benefits that they present for drivers of all ages.
As with all new traffic treatments, thorough public education, effective signing, and pavement markings are key to educating all drivers on new traffic patterns. So, are roundabouts safe for other road users? In general, pedestrians face far less risk at roundabouts than traditional intersections, primarily because of the slower speeds and the elimination of turns across the pedestrian crosswalks. Splitter islands both shorten the crossing distance for pedestrians and allow them to cross one direction of traffic at a time. All of this adds up to increased safety. There is ongoing research to determine the most effective strategies for making roundabouts accessible for visually impaired pedestrians. The U.S. Access Board has been active in the development of design guidelines for roundabouts. The National Cooperative Highway Research Program, NCHRP, is also researching a range of geometric designs, traffic control devices, and other treatments to make roundabouts more accessible to pedestrians with vision impairments. Bicyclists can dismount and use the pedestrian crosswalk, or experienced bicyclists can ride through the roundabout. What about trucks and other large vehicles? Are they able to navigate through roundabouts? Roundabouts can be built to accommodate the turning radii of large trucks and trailers, just like any other intersection. Roundabouts generally have truck aprons, a slightly raised area around the inner circle that provide trucks, buses, and other large vehicles additional room to navigate the roundabout. So what do emergency service providers think about roundabouts? Emergency service providers are able to navigate through roundabouts with their largest vehicles. In emergency situations, roundabouts can be safer and more efficient for an emergency vehicle than traditional intersections. Roundabouts can work very well on a wide range of road types, including freeway interchanges, urban and suburban corridors, and high-speed rural roadways. Some people think they can't be constructed on state roads, but that's just not true. There are numerous examples of successful roundabouts built on state roads, and the number is growing rapidly. The importance of proper design cannot be overstated. Good design is critical to the success of a roundabout. Other keys to success include public involvement and stakeholder support. FHWA offers numerous resources, including a one-day informational workshop for state and local transportation agencies. To learn more, visit the FHWA Safety website.
Well-designed roundabout intersections have been proven to not only help traffic move more efficiently, but also reduce the risk of fatal and serious crashes. This is why the Federal Highway Administration is strongly encouraging state and local leaders to take a hard look at roundabouts as an alternative to conventional intersection designs. If you're looking for ways to reduce congestion, improve safety, and enhance your community's environment, modern roundabouts may be just the solution for you.
I want to go into a little more detail why roundabouts are safer than traditional intersections. On this slide, what you see is the severity of accidents, and basically this is very intuitive. The higher the speed, the larger the angle, the more energy is transmitted, and the more serious the accident. What this slide here shows is that that there's a lot less conflict points in a roundabout than there are in a traditional intersection, and that I recognize most accidents happen at intersections. The types of accidents that occur in roundabouts tend to be at smaller angles and lower speeds because of design. As mentioned in that Federal Highway Administration video, experience throughout the country is significantly less fatal accidents, 70% less. So it's a proven technology, proven design. This phenomenon also relates to pedestrian vehicle type accidents. Roundabouts are safer for pedestrians than traditional intersections. It was mentioned in the video, but this is information from the National Cooperative Highway Research Program in a report that they had prepared regarding roundabout practices in the United States. This is actually one of their tables. Basically, it's not uncommon for people to have concerns about roundabouts, but after they've been constructed, usually opinions change. And lastly, about roundabouts, I wanted to go through the budget. In this slide, I show the sources of funding and the proposed expenditures for those funds. We have received a T grant, which is a Transportation Enhancement Activity Grant, for $895,300. A lot of the money in this project is involved in improving the appearance of the intersection in landscaping and hardscape, things like pavers, amenities, things like benches and banners and pots and artwork, to really create a gateway feature. That concludes this portion of the presentation. I would like you to welcome a colleague of mine, a longtime friend, and our planning director, Brian Ludicky.
My part of the presentation is to go over parking, not only within the downtown Lancaster area, but we've taken a look at several other cities that have successful downtowns and, believe it or not, a bit of controversy over parking, and to see what they've done in their situations. First of all, in downtown Lancaster, we know from the parking study that was done as part of the downtown specific plan in 2006 that there are approximately 3,000 parking spaces within the overall downtown Lancaster area. In 2006, which is the most recent data that we have, there was a study done to determine what was the maximum use of that overall parking in the downtown area. And that study showed that at that time, the maximum amount of parking occupancy in the downtown area was 38%, meaning that at the peak use of parking, approximately 2/3 of all the spaces downtown were still vacant. So at this point in time, we can very easily say that on an overall basis, downtown Lancaster has a surplus of parking. However, we have heard from people who have concerns about what we would like to call the core area of downtown. And that core area is essentially a 6-block portion of downtown. It's bounded on the north by Kettering and on the south by Milling. It begins at Fern and goes eastward to Date. And this core area, as shown a little bit more blown up here, is the area that since the city's adoption, not only of the specific plan, but the work downtown, has had the most change. That has included new construction on sites that contained in the past parking and in some cases buildings. That includes, as you're well aware, the Artist Lofts building, the Arbor on Date project, Sagebrush, the Bex Plaza, the kiosk buildings, and the cinema. We have also had buildings that were there before but have been occupied by uses that generate perhaps more demand than were there before. That obviously includes Bex, the Brooklyn Deli, the Lemon Leaf, which people may not remember didn't exist at the time in 2006 that we were doing the downtown specific plan, but came in shortly after that. And of course, the buildings, including the candy store and the lamplighter, and new construction that's underway on Kinetic Beer Works and those other types of businesses that are coming. And of course, there's been change to the streets, definitely on the boulevard itself with the Romulus construction and also with the reconfiguration of FIG south of Lancaster Boulevard. We went back and looked at the parking inventory that was done for the core area in 2006 and went back out and actually counted the parking that's there now. And in 2006, we found that on the boulevard itself, there were 39 parking spaces. With the reconstruction of the Romulus, there are now 65 within that 3-block stretch, an increase of 26 spaces. On-street parking, there's been some areas where there's been a little lost, but other areas where it's been picked up. And overall, the on-street parking, which is on streets other than the boulevard itself, has not changed that much. We found one additional space as compared to 2006. And off-street parking, even with the construction and things that have occurred, there's only been a loss of 5 off-street parking spaces in that time. So the total, back in 2006, our study found a little over 1,100 parking spaces. We find that we still have over 1,100 parking spaces in that core area, an increase of 22. And I think it's important to note that the count back in 2006 did not include any parking on Milling. It did not include parking on Kettering. Our current count does not include the parking that does occur on the Woolworth Foundation, even though it's used for parking. We didn't count that as parking spaces because in the long term, we don't expect it to be there as parking. But this shows you that overall, there hasn't been a great deal of physical change in the parking in that downtown core. Our there obviously has been new development. There's been new demand placed down there. And we went back and we looked based on our planning requirements, if every use in that core area, including the ones that aren't open yet, we've included the Kinetic Beer Works and certain other uses that aren't in place yet, but if every one of them demanded the maximum amount of parking at the same time, what would be the situation? And we found that that parking demand would be 1,051 spaces compared to the 1,158 that are available. So still a surplus of 107 spaces. So physically, from what we can tell, there's not a shortage of parking. This is not uncommon in downtown areas. However, the fact that there's enough physical parking hasn't stopped, from what we found, the concerns that there, quote, is no parking. And of course, what parking perception is based on things other than the actual physical number. It's based on where that parking is located. It's based on how visible that parking is and how aware people are of it. It's based on how safe they feel using it. And as I said, even though there may physically be enough parking, perception is a very powerful thing for people. If they perceive that there's a parking lack, then in their minds there is a parking lack. We find this not only in downtowns, but even this is the Lowe's Center. We get complaints that there is not enough parking around Chili's, even though if you look physically, there is more than enough parking around Chili's. However, people, for whatever reason, don't perceive this parking out here as something that's really useful for them. So once again, no physical lack of parking, but a perception that says there's not enough. In downtowns, we have found that rarely are parking complaints caused by an actual physical lack of parking. We have found that for downtown areas, management of the parking resource is extremely critical. Successful downtowns, wherever they are, do successfully manage their parking in some way. It doesn't mean that the debate always stops, but they do manage their parking. This is the city of Walnut Creek. Some of you may be familiar with it, a city in the East Bay. Very successful downtown. It has had a commitment to its downtown for decades. My stepdaughter actually used to live here, so I have some familiarity with it. They have some 7,000 parking spaces in their downtown area. But to kind of just go over what this perception issue can do, in 2009, they had a retailer who wanted to come into their downtown. That retailer offered to build 175 new parking spaces, but it needed a few adjustments to their city code to allow them to come in. The city council looked at it and ultimately approved a development agreement to allow that retailer to come into their downtown. Despite that, there was such a debate over whether there was enough parking that it was ultimately put on the ballot as a referendum to determine, as a vote of the Walnut Creek voters, whether there was enough parking to allow this retailer to come in to their downtown. It did pass by 70-30. The retailer that they had the vote over was Neiman Marcus. So if you can imagine a city saying, we're not quite sure we have enough parking, even though Neiman Marcus seems satisfied with it. We looked at 3 downtown areas that have, we believe, some similarities to Lancaster to see what they do with their parking situation and how they've managed it over time. The first is Ventura. Ventura has some similarities because a lot of what they do in their downtown is focused on one main street called, ironically, Main Street. They also have some very major draws in their downtown. They have cinemas, they have the Mission that's at the west end of their downtown area, and they have, based on their studies, about 3,500 parking spaces overall for their downtown. They've done their own study on what their maximum usage is. It's about 55%. Their peak time of use is Friday evenings in downtown Ventura. They have a goal of creating what they know, what is commonly called a park once environment. They want people to come, park, and walk their downtown. So that's what they've directed everything towards. They have several management strategies that they use for their parking. The first thing, fairly recent, is they have metered their on-street parking. They have less expensive surface and structured parking that's off of their main street. They do charge for that, but they charge a much lower rate for it. And they have spent a lot of time trying to encourage sharing of private lots. A lot of the parking in Ventura is actually scattered among private ownerships, and they've spent a great deal of time trying to get those property owners to agree to the shared use of their parking. Sometimes they are successful, sometimes they are not. There are situations where businesses who close at 5 o'clock in downtown Ventura will still not let people park in their lots, even though they are not open themselves. We took a look at another city that some of you, may find a little surprising, but Grand Junction, Colorado. Western side of Colorado, a city of about 70,000 people with a pretty long history of its downtown development and trying to keep it vital. They have a combination of on-street surface and garage parking in their downtown area, and you can see that their garage parking area or parking structure is located here about a half a block off their main street. They also have these surface parking lots that that are in other locations. They also have management strategies. They meter their side street parking. In other words, these north-south and east-west streets that are not the main street that they have. They also charge a fee for parking in their garage. And their design of their main street, which they interestingly don't meter, actually has a design that limits the amount of parking. For those of you who may be familiar with Montrose on the north side of Glendale, Montrose's main street, Honolulu Avenue, is modeled after Grand Junction, Colorado. It's kind of this undulating pattern where they have alternating bays of parking on each side of the street. Very attractive, traffic moves very slowly, people love to walk it, but it does limit the amount of parking that they have. So that's one of the things that they constantly manage. And we finally took a look at San Luis Obispo. Of the 3 cities that we studied, San Luis Obispo has the most highly developed parking and downtown development strategy. And they have done it in such a way that one complements and works with the other. In other words, what they're trying to achieve in their overall downtown development, they are using their downtown parking strategies and management approaches to accomplish. They have as one of their goals to eliminate small individually owned parking lots in their downtown. They would just assume that they not exist. They would rather that parking be either in these peripheral parking structures on the perimeter of their downtown, or they have parking that's on their or on their streets. They don't have a main street in the same sense that Lancaster or Ventura does. They tend to have more of a district, so they have a number of different streets that people walk down and are pretty vital. But they do have parking on those streets. They really want to create a city center, and this is once again the goal of San Luis Obispo. They want a dense and walkable city center. They want to, I saw in the literature that they have, they want to evoke this kind of European feel to their center city area. Their parking strategies and their management approaches work to create this kind of environment. First of all, they've reduced the parking requirement in their downtown area by half. They've said that depending on if you were to develop in another part of San Luis Obispo, say, and your business required 10 parking spaces, if you go into their downtown, they're only going to ask you for 5. They do not require, but they do give the option for you to pay an in-lieu parking fee instead of providing parking on your property. They do this for a couple of reasons. Number one, they really want you to develop the entire property with building and active uses. They would prefer that, as I said, the parking be centralized in these other locations. So they offer you the option to pay rather than develop and maintain your own parking area. And they meter all of their on-street parking. They're not very apologetic about this. Their feeling is if people want to park in those prime spaces, they'll be willing to pay to park in those prime spaces. They charge a flat $1.25 an hour. And they do charge to park in their parking structures, but they charge a much less reduced fee, 75 cents per hour. San Luis Obispo, naturally, if it's going with this approach for parking structures, has to come up with a way to fund them. Their feeling is that they want 40% of that cost to be borne by the private sector. And what they mean by that is that those in-lieu parking fees that they offer to businesses, they expect are going to ultimately pay for about 40% of the cost of their long-term parking structure construction. 60% of the funding they expect is going to be public. And what they mean by that is a combination of what they get from their meter revenue and their parking fee charge within their parking structures, but also what they expect to get because they're encouraging full development of private property. In other words, if you were going to normally build a 4,000 square foot building on your 8,000 square foot lot, they would just assume that you spend the time and the money to build an 8,000 square foot building and you have leasable space to somebody else. The city believes that over time it generates enough revenue from sales and other taxes on that extra development that will help pay for the long-term parking within the downtown area. So that is San Luis Obispo's strategy and thought. And as you can see, they've spent a lot of time thinking about and developing this approach. And once again, it meshes very nicely with what they want in their downtown. Their latest structure, approved, but obviously not yet built, 445 space structure at about $20 million. In the long term, somebody asked me this the other day, I said, do you think Lancaster, downtown Lancaster needs parking structure? I said, yes, it does. Does it need it right now? Yeah, maybe in some cases, but it certainly needs it because I think the long-term value in Lancaster is those empty parking lots that you see that are only about 38 or 40% occupied. They represent future development sites that are not only good for the city, but good for the other businesses that are already down here, creating much more of a draw and ever increasing the success that we have in our downtown area. So, to summarize, successful downtown parking. Successful downtowns have a long-term parking management strategy. They integrate that strategy with what their actual development goals are for their downtown, what they want their downtown to be. And they must realistically address the revenue and the costs associated with that parking management strategy and the approach to providing parking.
We took a look at what it would take to build a parking structure. We used San Luis Obispo as a good source of information. In the style of San Luis Obispo, this is what we kind of envisioned what a parking structure might look like, and that is not look like a parking structure. We took some lessons from them, and what we could envision is a 4-story mixed-use parking retail structure that would provide 620 parking spaces. It would sit on a 2-acre site. It'd be roughly 345,000 square feet on the 4 floors. The first floor being 49,600 square feet of retail, say roughly 50,000 square feet of retail. And on the upper level, a 2,000 square foot event center. Now, we haven't selected a site. This is just a concept that we're going to base our estimates on. So we looked at what it would cost to construct it. What we found is it's roughly $23 million. This does not include any land cost. This is just a conceptual estimate. There's no street frontage improvements. But we think it's realistic. We compared our estimates to other cities for their cost of their parking structures, and we find that our estimates fall in line with their actual cost. When we looked at it, we also looked at the annual operating expense associated with a parking structure, and we actually use these numbers from San Luis Obispo's program. There are certain assumptions in it, but it's something to keep in mind is that there is a cost to operate a parking structure. We went back and looked at potential revenue. We think we tried to be conservative in this. We allowed $1 a square foot for the lease of retail space. We adjusted the parking structure numbers to allow reserved parking, say, for instance, if we were to put it on an existing business's lot so that their parking was reserved and not included in the revenue numbers. What you can see is that number is about $900,000 in revenue. The way we feel about it, it's really going to be part of an overall parking management strategy about where it would be located and how much is needed. But this is just to give you a feel for it. That concludes our presentation.